Welcome to the Tesla Economist. Please hit the thumbs up and remember to subscribe. You can also follow me on Twitter and talk to me on Patreon. As you know, I've been working through so many scenarios on legacy autos' chances of survival, and I think I finally cracked it. And I think I might have actually been wrong in assuming they'll no longer be around, but potentially still correct about them going bankrupt. It's not my style to reinforce a narrative and act simply as a cheerleader to reassure your financial decisions. I just like talking about how I think the industry could play out. I think I may have been a little naive in my thinking and have now come to a new realization that although legacy auto CEOs have been lying to us, that still holds true. I mean, come on, claiming they're going to be the leaders in the EV revolution or battery technology? The only EV revolution that they're likely to lead is one revolting against EVs. But despite their lies, I'm starting to believe that they believe they can actually make it. And it's not entirely a dog and pony show they're putting on for investors. If this is the case, I think I've worked out how it could be achieved. If there's a chip shortage, then the auto manufacturers are going to prioritise their sales to their electric cars and close down any plants making cars that are less profitable, which they're already doing. Legacy can't close down their electric vehicle lines as they need to maintain their economies of scale. They will lose their economies of scale with their other lines and unlikely to return, and thus unlikely to reopen the factories. But these electric cars will still be expensive, which means there has to be a tax credit for the consumer to make legacy EVs a closer price to their ICE cars. But at the same time, they're reducing ICE supply. Therefore, ICE prices will also rise, supply and demand. Less supply means higher prices. So it won't just be the price of EVs reducing closer to the price of ICE, but the price of ICE will be rising at the same time. We're talking about retail prices here, not whatever the car dealerships add on to. For this reason, there is no possible way the tax credit will be limited to $40,000. As I've said in a previous video, it wouldn't happen either, but this would make it certain, as legacy autos would simply struggle to make anything that anyone really wanted to buy at that price point when compared to a Tesla. That would also be benefiting from a $10,000 tax credit. Due to this fall in supply, all cars are going to become more expensive, which means demand for new cars won't be what it used to be. Tesla will be the best value car available and the lowest cost when comparing like for like. And I found where I went wrong. I was thinking along the lines that Legacy would try and replace their entire production lines and aim for a similar number of models and units sold, but instead they'll just be a niche. They're going to downsize significantly. They will cut production on their least profitable ICE cars and keep scaling up their EV production. The consumer will have less options available, and due to the likely substantial waiting list for a Tesla, many people will be convinced to pay a bit more for a Ford they can receive much earlier. Of course, legacy autos will be severely supply constrained by batteries for some time. By 2025, they're targeting a capacity of 1 million EVs a year each. By 2025, there won't be any consumers stupid enough to buy ICE vehicles anymore, especially not when they're possibly even more expensive than electric by that stage. Once you go electric, you never go back. But due to such little supply, there'll be some demand, even at these inflated prices. Inflated prices means higher profit margins. But eventually, the demand for the remaining ICE will dwindle until the prices are so high, even with supply cut, no one is buying any more, especially when Tesla increased their supply significantly. Which means legacy autos are left with just their EVs in production, due to nothing else being feasible. In other words, more like 100% EVs before 2025. Now, here's the big question. Have legacy autos remained solvent? Well, most likely not. Very unlikely, I would say. But if they reach this stage, they could have carved out a profitable niche for themselves, even if they're only selling around 500,000 to 1 million units a year. But has the ICE business bankrupt them before they reach this stage is the question. And if it did bankrupt them, did the government continue to bail them out to reach this stage of production? Well, let's review this. Ford and GM have closed down plants, and lots of workers have lost their jobs. The UAW is not happy, and it's clear that there is nothing that can be done to get these jobs back. As for one, these workers are not skilled for a lot of the new EV jobs, and two, well, there just aren't enough jobs, as they're now producing perhaps 1/10 the number of cars. So a bailout may not be in the equation, which means they go into bankruptcy. Despite legacy autos creating a profitable EV company, the rest of the company will take it all down, but they will still have to sell all their assets to cover bondholders and debtors. Well, there is value in their EV business. Perhaps they're making $10,000 to $15,000 gross profit per sale on each EV. If they can reach 1 million units a year, then that's possibly around $10 billion. That is not nothing. The EV business can be extracted and sold off. Perhaps LG, Panasonic or SK Innovation might buy it, or some other conglomerate. They're just buying the brands, intellectual property and manufacturing facilities. They're no longer obligated to the car dealer network or unions anymore either, making it significantly more profitable to a buyer than it is to the legacy autos. Now, if legacy autos have been too stubborn to adapt to Tesla's FSD and supercharger network, then this will happen much sooner. But if they have accepted this gift handed to them on a silver platter and not looked this gift horse in the mouth, then their EVs have more likely been selling, because in a few years having an AV, autonomous vehicle, will be even more important than it being an EV. But if they didn't adapt, then whomever buys the EV business certainly will. It's imperative to survival. So I think this is how legacy auto brands will remain. They may not be run by the same people. In fact, they really can't. They're the main reason they're in this mess. Too stuck with legacy systems. Their entire companies need a restructuring with different mindsets. So they'll need new management, and it will likely be owned by different shareholders. But like I say, unless government cover all their ICE failures and allow them to transition to EVs, but the thing is, this scenario will not save any jobs. It will not expand their EV business any further. It will not benefit the UAW. That side of the business is already finished. UAW is quite possibly not going to be happy with the legacy autos anyway, due to perhaps 90% of them losing their jobs. Legacy autos still have their costs of their legacy systems to contend with, which means their EVs can never be that profitable. It's just too hard. But if these brands were restructured into modern-day automotive systems like Tesla, then it would make a big impact. Of course, they'll likely need to spend money on advertising still, but no more unions or car dealers. And if a battery company purchased them, then that would be a big step in vertical integration. Ford and GM will simply struggle too much to get themselves out of these legacy systems. But if the EV business is extracted out, then there is potentially $10,000 more profit per car sold for them, making it a very profitable business. Of course, the numbers will just be significantly lower in sales than their previous ICE sales. As for the car dealerships, well, obviously they can't sell new cars anymore, but they can still maintain old ICE cars in their service centres, and they need to adapt to EV service centres too. Remember, this is still one of Tesla's disadvantages, the lack of service centres, although it will obviously improve. But these legacy brands already have the infrastructure for them potentially. Of course, the issue is that EVs don't need to be serviced and they don't have so many parts to go wrong, which means within time, as ICE cars on the road become less and less, the service centres will also dwindle. However, in the meantime, a lot of people may be holding on to their ICE cars for a lot longer, due to cars being so much more expensive and waiting lists for Teslas being so long, so they will still have a car maintenance business for a little while longer. Anyway, like I always say, it will be interesting to see how it all unfolds. Thanks for listening. Please hit the thumbs up and subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter and talk to me on Patreon.